So this is about the Canadian perspective. So I brought up a map of Canada and where our population is. Canada is the second largest nation in the world, but our population is 35,000, or sorry, about 35,000. It's about the size of a California. Yeah, so it is spread over a huge territory. But what you have to understand, though, is that most of our population is within 100 miles of the US border. So we have this thin layer across the country. So what are the advantages of doing research in Canada? Well, first, I have to give you the spotlight of what is a CLL patient in Canada. The incidence of CLL is about 8 out of 100,000 people, which is similar to the incidence in other countries. The male to female ratio is around 1.3 to 1. And the relative survival is poor as you age. So over 75 years have a lower overall survival relative to their age-matched peers as opposed to younger patients. And this is in 1999 to 2003. And the reason I say that is that that's before rituximab became the standard therapy. So it will be interesting as we go forward to see what happens with these older patients. Another important point is when we looked at the clinic in Manitoba, we found that the average age was around 67, not the 72, which has been reported for CLL. So this has actually changed practice in Manitoba, in which we actually send a letter to physicians stating that there is a CLL clinic at the cancer center and to refer the patients to us or consult us. This has led to an increase in the average age within the clinic to closer to 70 years of age. And as Dr. Johnson indicated, that there was an equal survival of these older patients within the clinic. So the reasons for this we don't know, but it is part of ongoing research. As other speakers have indicated, there's also an increased risk of second cancers in CLL patients, about a twofold, and it's mainly skin cancers. This in Manitoba has led us to have a dermatologist within the CLL clinic that sees patients as they arrive so that we can detect these cancers early and put patients on screening programs so that we can impact them. But the point I want to say is that the average CLL patient in Canada is very similar to the average CLL patient in Europe and in the United States. So what are the advantages of doing CLL research in Canada? Well, we do have one healthcare system with one provider. So this will allow us to actually track patients and do population-based studies. Canadian scientists have been trained around the world and have come back and set up research facilities here in Canada. And with our provinces, we have provincial cancer agencies that can provide the opportunity for CLL patients to take part in CLL-related studies, such as understanding the CLL populations in general. However, there are challenges to research in Canada. One of the challenges, which is not faced by larger centers, is that we have a lack of resources for instituting clinical trials. There is a new program being spearheaded by the Canadian Partnerships Against Cancer to try to increase these resources in the country, but it still becomes a challenge, and especially if it's an investigator-initiated clinical trial. Also, as other speakers have mentioned, there is a lot of biomarkers associated with CLL, but each center has their own repertoire of biomarkers that they track for various reasons that are for the center that they are located in. So one thing that we need to do is to try to get more standardized approaches so that we can compare data from one center to the next. Also, there needs to be established CLL clinical databases that can be shared. So each center collects CLL data, but they collect different aspects of CLL data depending upon what they're interested in. We need to have a network of common data shared across the country, and we're working towards that. And finally, funding. You need to do research, you need to have money to do it. And in Canada, this is a challenging landscape. And as you can see here, this is a graph of cancer research funding from 2008 to 2012, with the red bar indicating basic science, the purple representing treatment research, and the rest other pillars of cancer research. What I want to point out here is that treatment costs have continued to go up, and so research in that area has gotten an increase in funding, while the funding for basic science has gone down. What it's suggesting is that it overall provides a very flat landscape in terms of funding. So as a group, we have to work closer together in order to have a more effective way of doing research so that we have, because we'll have to do this in less dollars. In order to increase research, we in Manitoba have established the CLL Tumor Bank within the Manitoba Tumor Bank. This is a bank in which we will be able to store CLL blood samples, and this has been established through our foundation and with Dr. Johnson and myself spearheading it. Right as of today, we have over 900 patients consented to the bank and over 10,000 samples actually banked. This year, we hope to break 1,000 patients consented. These samples are available to all researchers within Canada, and we collaborate with researchers not just in Canada, from around the world, in order for them to use this resource. We collect these samples not to store them, but to use them. We also collaborate with the clinical trials networks in Canada to store patient samples on clinical trial so that researchers can do translational studies understanding why or how these experimental therapeutics have worked. We also collect various biomarkers for these CLL cells so that we can distribute it to researchers across Canada. As you've seen in previous talks, there is a large amount of biomarkers in CLL. It's truly a biomarker disease. And we have attempted to collect all these biomarkers within our tumor bank. But one of the questions we asked was, is the CLL patient in Canada presenting with these biomarkers the same as what has been presented by other centers? So we have done the mutational analysis of the immunoglobulin gene and looked at treatment-free survival. Now this curve here is opposite to what you would normally see. So the increase actually means less time to treatment. A shorter time to treatment, and the mutation below line is longer time for treatment. So the treatment-free survival is better in the mutated patients as opposed to the unmutated patients, which is exactly what the researchers in Europe and in the United States have shown. So the CLL patients in our bank are similar to what you would see in other centers. We now have 80% of our CLL bank patients with mutational status, and we also have 60% that have ZAP70 status, which has been associated with the mutational status of the immunoglobulin gene. We have further established databases for the clinical outcomes for these patients and established the CLL bank through the course of the disease. What I mean by that is that we just don't bank a patient at the time they hit the clinic. We bank them each year thereafter, so we have a complete course of their disease so that we will be able to study different questions in terms of CLL biology. Furthermore, we are creating a bioinformatics database so that we can link the information that we get from the CLL sample to the clinical information so that we can answer questions that we wouldn't normally be able to do. And we want to link this database, as I told you before, to other databases in Canada so that we can have a bigger repertoire of CLL patients and be able to answer questions.